The Wolfman was released in 1941 and was Universal's second foray into werewolf cinema, following the underpromoted and underappreciated Werewolf of London from 1935. Whilst the earlier film faded into obscurity, The Wolfman cemented the werewolf as a staple of Universal's classic monster lineup. Larry Talbot, played by Lon Chaney Jr., returns to his ancestral home in Wales after the death of his brother. Whilst trying to reconnect with his estranged father, Sir John Talbot, Larry becomes romantically interested in Gwen Conliffe, a local shopkeeper, after spying on her with his telescope.
He's a peeping Tom.
And wasting no time at all, the peeping Tom heads over to the shop to flirt with Gwen. And whilst he is there, he purchases a cane, which is topped with a silver wolf's head and a pentagon etched into the side of it.
What's this pentagram business?
Every werewolf is marked with that and sees it in the palm of his next victim's hand.
Larry tries to convince Gwen to meet him that night at 8 o'clock, but she refuses because she is engaged to be married. But Larry just doesn't take no for an answer.
We'll take a little walk tonight, then we'll talk it over.
No.
See you at 8.
No.
How about tonight?
No.
Fine, I'll be here at 8.
Despite Gwen being engaged to another fella.
Oh.
And that night, Larry meets up with Gwen and her friend Jenny, and they visit Dracula himself, Bela Lugosi, who isn't actually playing Dracula in this movie. He's playing a gypsy fortune teller, who is also called Bela. Jenny decides to stay behind and have her palm read by Bela, whilst Gwen and Larry go for a nice romantic walk in the spookiest forest you've ever seen. Whilst reading Jenny's palm, Bela sees the sign of a pentagon upon her hand, and this really seems to freak him out, and he demands that Jenny leaves right away. And it turns out that Bela the gypsy is actually a werewolf, and off screen he transforms into a wolf. Not a wolf man, just an ordinary wolf. And fun fact, this wolf that you actually see on screen was played by Lon Chaney's pet dog, who was a German shepherd called Moose. The wolf attacks Jenny, and Larry arrives and beats the wolf with his silver cane, killing it, but not before himself is bitten on the chest. Unfortunately, Jenny was killed by the wolf, and Larry is now suspected of murder after the discovery of Bela the gypsy's dead body, who has now of course turned back into its human form. Soon Larry learns that the creature that bit him was actually a werewolf, and soon he will become one himself. And as the transformation takes hold, Larry struggles with his identity, guilt, and the terrifying reality of his condition. The film builds towards a tragic climax as Larry's monstrous side threatens those he loves. Now, unlike Dracula, who had Bram Stoker's novel to define his lore, the werewolf lacked a clear origin story. The Wolfman filled that gap, introducing key elements that became staples of the genre. For example, silver as a weakness. The idea that werewolves could be killed by silver, especially silver bullets, was popularised here. And then we have the tragic duality of the werewolf. Lon Chaney Jr.'s portrayal of Larry Talbot gave us the tortured soul, a man cursed to become a monster struggling with guilt and fear. And then of course there is the full moon connection. And while not emphasised in this particular film, later entries in the same franchise with Lon Chaney playing the same Wolfman did cement the full moon as the trigger for the transformation. So yeah, I'm going to include it here. The Wolfman didn't just entertain, it defined the rules. Its legacy shaped decades of werewolf films, books and folklore, giving the creature a tragic depth and a consistent mythology that hadn't existed before and is still around to this very day. So we've learned where the lore of the werewolf came from, now let's talk about the visual style. The makeup used to transform Chaney from man to wolf took around 5 to 6 hours to apply and an hour to remove. And in more modern werewolf movies with the help of prosthetics and CGI, you would probably see the full body transformation. But in 1941, they simply focused on Lon Chaney's feet, and then they did a simple crossfade to where Lon Chaney was wearing some simple rubber wolf-like feet, what was covered in yak hair. And that was all we got of the transformation, just focusing on the feet. And then the next shot is of Chaney in full wolfman makeup as he prowls the fog-filled forest, looking for his first kill. Now, here's an interesting fact. The makeup used for Lon Chaney was initially designed for Henry Hull in Werewolf of London, the werewolf movie that we mentioned earlier that came previous. But that makeup design wasn't used in that movie, and it was recycled for Lon Chaney Jr. to wear in this movie. The Wolfman is the only Universal monster to be played by the same actor in all of the upcoming movies, 4 in total. But in these movies he wasn't the star. The Wolfman never actually got a direct sequel. He was simply just a side character with other Universal monsters appearing in certain movies, such as Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman 1943, House of Frankenstein 1944, House of Dracula 1945, and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein 1948, which was actually a comedic film. And even though the Wolfman was kind of like a guest star in these movies, Lon Chaney always played the character. He was proud and protective of the role, and he even referred to the Wolfman as his baby. And let's take a moment to talk about the sets. They were absolutely amazing, especially the fog-drenched forest set that the Wolfman liked to stalk his prey in. It looked haunted itself, like the forest was also a character in this movie. It brought the atmosphere, and it brought the chills, and it inspired other horror-themed movies throughout the years, such as American Werewolf in London, for example, which saw the main characters attacked by a wolf on the fog-filled moors.
Beware the moon.
In 2010, Universal released a remake of the 1941 classic starring Benicio del Toro, Anthony Hopkins and Hugo Weaving, and Emily Blunt. Unfortunately, this movie had a low box office return, and it was met with mixed reviews, which meant no sequel. But in my opinion, The Wolfman 2010 was actually a pretty good movie, and I revisit it now and again. And I was a massive fan of the practical effects that was used in that movie. There was some CGI here and there, but most of it was practical effects. And I'm fully on board for that. I would much rather see a movie using practical effects over CGI any day of the week. And then of course there is a more recent reboot of The Wolfman starring Christopher Abbott, which I thought was a really good horror movie. I really did enjoy it. But it did not feel like a Wolfman reboot. At all, in any way. He didn't even look like a werewolf, let alone a wolfman. He looked more like one of the characters from the Wrong Turn movies. Whereas in the 2010 movie, it was unmistakable that it was a Wolfman reboot. Since The Wolfman was released in 1941, there have been over 150 movies made featuring the werewolf. But in my mind, there's only a few that really stand out, and The Wolfman from 1941 is most definitely one of them. This movie is just so important. Just like a werewolf transforms from a man to a beast, the Wolfman transformed horror itself. It shaped werewolf lore. The film introduced the full moon curse, silver bullets, and the idea that a werewolf bite passes the curse. Rules that became genre staples. And I can confidently say that nearly every werewolf movie owes a debt to 1941's The Wolfman.